During the Fate Karakura Town arc, Aizen had undertaken a series of transformations. After he had fused his body with the Hokyoku, he had transformed into a transcendent being, meaning that he effectively had crossed the barrier between a Shinigami and a Hollow to attain a new godlike state of being. The forms that Aizen transforms into were pretty controversial, with some people feeling that they were not designed well, especially his cocoon form. In this video, we will understand each of the 5 phases of Aizen's transcended state. What was significant about him fusing with the Hogyoku, what did each form represent, and did he literally transform himself into a hideous hollow butterfly? Let's find out everything that there is to know about Aizen's Hokyoku fusion forms. Before the video begins, only 20% of the people who actually watch my content are subscribed to the channel. If you enjoy these videos, then subscribe and stick around for more content just like this. Now let's get back to the topic of the video. After he had fused with the Hokyoku, Aizen eventually attains immortality and a huge amount of spiritual pressure. Now while he returns back to normal after he is defeated by Ichigo, he does however remain immortal and he still has a large amount of spiritual pressure at his disposal. He demonstrates this during the 1000 Year Blood War arc, and it's the reason why he was selected as one of Yhwach's 5 great war powers. The Hokyoku fuses with Aizen after he places it into his chest, and from the onset of this fusion, he demonstrates a boost in his strength and abilities. He becomes immune to being injured, as the Hokyoku is actively now healing him. This is demonstrated in chapter 395, when he appears with only slight burns after the head captain unleashes the forbidden Hado technique Ito Kaso. In chapter 396, he also withstands a holified Getsuga Tensho at point blank range, which does little more than cut his left shoulder. The Hokyoku protects its master, constantly healing his injuries within his first fused form of his evolution. He also proves to have a very durable body after he withstands Hado 91 Senju Koten Taiho from Urahara, which ends up unleashing 1,000 blasts fired at him like cannonballs. After the dust settles, he appears unscathed, as he states that after having absorbed the Hokyoku, he is beginning to surpass the limits of his original power, which we know were already unmatched by most of the Soul Society. He has now become so powerful that it is not worth him avoiding being hit by a Kido spell even in the 90s, which we know are some of the most powerful techniques within Bleach. His enhanced strength is demonstrated when he is able to cut through Urahara's flesh with just a casual swipe of his arm. This is another improvement that he acquires thanks to the Hokyoku evolving his physical form. The second form of his evolution begins to appear during his battle against Urahara. After he attacks him with Hado 91, Aizen appears with half of his face covered. Urahara then attempts to block the Reiatsu vents in his wrist in an attempt to make him burn from the inside by his own spiritual pressure. After a large explosion erupts, Aizen emerges unharmed, but in his second Hokyoku fused state, which he refers to as his chrysalis stage. His face is completely covered in a white layer that extends down the length of his body, also forming a long white cloak, which has an opening at the center of his chest showcasing the Hokyoku, which is now firmly embedded into his body and has become a part of him. At the end of chapter 403, we see that his Zanpakuto has fully merged with his arm, which is a key indicator that he has now become transcendent, as this also happens with Ichigo in his Dangai form. The enhancements that he experiences from his first form are carried forward in this second form, and they are further amplified, as he is now able to easily block Isshin's Zanpakuto and an attack from Yoriichi, who is now cladded in special armor. He fights in his chrysalis stage completely unfazed by any of Isshin, Urahara and Yoriichi's attacks. In chapter 406, we see him bleeding from his forehead after withstanding a Getsuga Tensho from Isshin. This proves that he can be hurt if the attack is strong enough, but it does very little to stop Aizen. In this form, he has such enhanced speed that Urahara, Isshin and Yoriichi struggle to keep up with his movements, resulting in him being able to catch Yoriichi off guard in chapter 404 and swiftly being able to knock the 3 of them out in chapter 406. Now, like I mentioned earlier, he has gained so much spiritual pressure that no ordinary Shinigami or human will now be able to detect him. He describes his current state of power with the analogy of a 2-dimensional being unable to interact with a 3-dimensional being. This is why it is so significant that Ichigo was able to sense Aizen's spiritual pressure. He was the only one who was able to detect the vast difference in their power, which momentarily had made him sink into despair. However, Isshin had rightfully stated in chapter 406 that only someone at a similar level of power to Aizen will be able to sense his spiritual pressure. This is what gave Isshin the idea to train Ichigo within the Bankai, as their last form of hope to put a stop to Aizen. At the end of Aizen's chrysalis stage, his face cracks and the rest of his body begins to break apart like he is emerging from a shell casing. In his third Hokyoku fused form, we once again see his face, with the main difference being that the whites of his eyes are now purple, with another change being that he has longer hair, signifying that he must have experienced a faster passage of time within the chrysalis stage. This is similar to how Ichigo emerged with longer hair after having trained for 3 months within the Bankai, while only a few moments had passed within the real world. Aizen's clothing also changes as he now has jagged collars running from his shoulders down to his chest, which meet at the point that the Hokyoku is fused within his body. He further proves his immense endurance when he chooses to confront the Kototsu, completely destroying the sweeper of the Bankai. The Kototsu is known to instantly kill anyone who comes into contact with it, making sure that nobody stays within the Bankai longer than they have to, stopping them from taking advantage of the time distortion that exists within the Bankai. After Aizen destroys the Kototsu, it gives Isshin the idea to train Ichigo within the Bankai. In chapter 409, we witness how immense Aizen's spiritual pressure has now become in his third form, as it is enough to disintegrate the soul of a human who is standing only a few feet away from him. In chapter 411, he states that if Don Kanonji had made contact with Aizen, then his soul would have collapsed, instantly killing him on the spot. In chapter 415, we see that the area of Gin's body that Aizen had touched actually disintegrated after it had reacted to his incredible spiritual pressure. Aizen goes on to transform into his fourth Hokyoku fused form after being attacked by Gin Ichimaru's attack Kill God-Killing Spear. We see that his spiritual pressure unleashes from his chest as he yells out in anger, and the hole in his body ends up being healed, with his body being engulfed with his raw power, which transforms his appearance into the iconic butterfly form that we have all come to know. Within this form, Aizen has a hole in his chest with a cross at the center of it. Aizen's cloak extends and spreads out, with 3 sets of wings also appearing behind him. Another notable change that occurs are with his face, as he now has a diamond-shaped hole on his forehead. Both his eyebrows and the strand of hair hanging from the front of his face have vanished, along with both of his irises, giving him now more of a sinister, evil appearance. When he is confronted by Ichigo, we see that the shape of his wings change as they are less rounded, and they appear to be more pointed, as seen in chapter 418. Through this form, we can confidently state that he has undergone a form of metamorphosis. He acquires these butterfly-like wings, which are symbolic of his desire to transcend to the heavens, to become transcendent and overthrow the rule of the Soul King. In chapter 416, he thanks Gin for helping him to evolve, as he states that overcoming the fear of death was a requirement to reach this form, because he has now transcended beyond a Shinigami and a Hollow. Aizen once again can instantly heal any wounds that he sustains in this form. He can inflict serious injury with minimal movement, and he can dematerialize himself and appear in another location, as he demonstrates the ability to teleport himself. The final form of Aizen's Hokyoku fusion is literally menacing and appears to be an incarnation of evil. His face resembles that of Venom from the Marvel Universe, especially with his freakishly oversized mouth and his creepy eyes. This form is a state of being that is no longer a Shinigami or a Hollow. He has actually taken up the form of a god. The Hokyoku reacts with anger after Aizen is injured by Ichigo. This results in him undergoing a further forced transformation, which manifested from Aizen's desire to not lose against a mere human. He now has more of a hollow-like appearance, and a third eye has now opened up on his forehead, as well as the skin on his face splitting apart, revealing a demonic black skull face. His hands and feet turn into blackened claws, with his right arm remaining fused with his Zanbakudo. His butterfly wings join together to form one big set of wings, and in this form Aizen ends up unleashing purple energy spheres from his hollow skulls that form on his wings. These are powerful attacks that cause devastating damage to the surroundings. Aizen had continued to transform until he had awakened a third eye, representing the pineal gland activating. This visually symbolizes that he had attained some form of enlightenment, or had evolved to a higher state of consciousness and awareness. When his third eye splits and blood begins to pour from it, I believe that this represents his awakening being tainted or impure. From his appearance alone, he comes across like a demonic figure, and then the blood that begins pouring from his third eye proves that he didn't undergo a pure, meaningful enlightenment, similar to what we see depicted within countless religious beliefs. Before reaching this state, like Aizen had betrayed his subordinates. He had treated others with contempt, and he looked down on anybody who did not think like him. One example of attaining true enlightenment is revealed through Buddhism, where it states that you can only reach this level after you find out the truth of life and you stop your cycle of reincarnation. Enlightenment is attained through countless hours of self-reflection and meditation, ridding yourself of all desires and attachments to the world. From this definition of enlightenment, we can see that Aizen has strayed very far away from this, resulting in his ultimate demise after he was defeated by Ichigo, who in fact had sacrificed his desire to protect others in order to become transcendent himself. He had reached a point where he was even stronger than Aizen, who was unable to sense Ichigo's spiritual pressure. He was so arrogant and conceited that it didn't cross his mind that Ichigo was stronger than him. Instead, he had inhaled a dangerously high level of copium, which made him come out with one of the most ridiculous lines in the series, that Ichigo had traded in his spiritual pressure to gain more physical strength, when in actuality Ichigo had in fact gained so much more power in his Bankai form that he was beyond Aizen's sense of perception. It was Ichigo who had attained a true godlike state, while Aizen was in more of a form befitting a false god. Now, this was pretty much everything that we know about Aizen's Hokyoku fused forms, as well as my thoughts on what each transformation had represented and how Aizen had in fact strayed far away from being truly transcendent. I want to now hand over the discussion to all of you. What do you think of Aizen's Hokyoku fused forms? Did you find them to be lackluster and poorly designed, or were you pleasantly surprised with them? I would love to read all of your thoughts in the comments, so definitely continue the discussion. And lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I can't wait to see you in my next Bleach video. If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.